Yeah, thanks for everyone for joining. For those of you who don't know us, we're a global team. We're a global team that's been active in Nevada for a very long time, and collectively have been involved in the discovery of more than 40 million ounces in the state, which is a fairly large percentage of all the gold that's been discovered in Nevada. And what we're going to look at today is how we're the first mover looking to apply new tools to look in the half of Nevada that really hasn't been looked at. And that's the half of Nevada that's undercover. And what I mean by that, it's places where the bedrock, the prospective units, the mineralization is hidden from view beneath sand and gravel and other products that have washed down off the mountains and effectively covered the basins. And what I really want to hit home today is what the opportunity is in Nevada undercover and why the industry is really at a point of transition. Then what we're going to land on is using these new tools, these new technologies. We put together a portfolio of brand new projects, and one of them in particular over the last couple of years has come to the forefront. It's become our flagship project. It's called Southgrass Valley, and last month we began our third phase of drilling at the project. It's pretty exciting, and for 2021 here, we think we have an opportunity here to make a globally significant discovery. So we're going to hit on what undercover is, what the opportunity in Nevada is, how we're capitalizing on this opportunity. And then a couple Mondays ago, we published all of our data at Southgrass Valley within a Verify model. So we're going to transition and actually look at the model and understand where we're drilling and what we're hoping to find. To put us in context, we trade for about $20 million. Our share capital is over here. And we've all, in terms of management and directors, we've all participated and put our own money in all the way along. I personally teamed up with my colleague Wade Hodges in 2004, moved to Reno to begin this program. And so we're all here for one reason, and that's because we think we have the opportunity to make a large discovery. So there's a lot of talk right now, and it's really great to be participate in this event. And I think it's important that we all take a look at the numbers, because yes, it's a really good place to be. And people tell us this all the time, but it's really important to understand where the value has been created and where the opportunities lie. The vast majority of Nevada's gold endowment come from these Carlin systems that Max mentioned in the last talk. And at 250 million ounces, it's certainly globally significant. It's one of only 6 belts in the world of that size. But as much as Nevada's gold is really focused within this one type of deposit, even within this style of mineralization, these ounces are very much focused within 3 camps. Carlin, Cortez, and Getchell, between 50 to 100 million ounces in scale. And these 3 camps represent 80% of Nevada's Carlin ounces. So the prize in Nevada, what put Nevada on the map really are these 3 camps, and everything else comparatively is relatively insignificant. So as we go and we want to look at the second half of Nevada, which is undercover, which is what we're going to talk about today, the prize is in finding the 4th, potentially 5th and 6th camp scale gold endowments in Nevada. And that's everything we've done as a company has been predicated based on looking for these brand new large camps. Because what we know about these camps is they're very similar in terms of how they're built. They're very similar in terms of their architecture, and they're very similar in terms of the size of the mineral system that's required in order to deposit 50 million ounces. So when we look at our drilling program today at Southgrass Valley, we're going to turn back to what it is we're looking for and how we plan a drilling program to go after a brand new camp. So these 3 camps, like I said, are what put Nevada on the map. Prior to the discovery of these 3 camps, Nevada was a relatively insignificant gold producer, less than 500,000 ounces per year. Once these 3 camps were discovered, Nevada very quickly, over a matter of a couple decades, produced close to 9 million ounces per year. Since the discovery of these big 3 camps, there's been relatively little found in Nevada outside of these camps. And really, regardless of more money being spent by more people than ever before over the last couple decades, Nevada's production's fallen about 40%. And I just got the data for 2019, and we're down 13% from where it was in 2018. So yes, it's a wonderful place to be. We should all be looking in Nevada, but we should not be looking for these sorts of things. We should be looking for the next camps. That we want to be on this part of the curve. So as we go into the covered half of Nevada, the places we want to be are getting back to really participating in these sorts of value creation exercises, not fighting over the last marginal ounces in the in the other districts. So this is where we're trying to be, and this is where we position Nevada exploration in what we consider to be the second chapter in Nevada's gold production. So this is what's left to explore in Nevada. The places that are sticking out of the ground, the bedrock that we can see, about 45% of Nevada here, we can see about 55% of the state we can't see. There's been plus 200 million ounces produced to date from what we can see. The USGS, Nevada Bureau of Mines, everybody agrees there's 200 million ounces waiting to be found undercover. The question is, what do we do when the tools that work well here don't work well when we can't see the rocks? And most simply, what we have to begin to integrate are new exploration technologies. And the tool that's taking hold globally to look undercover is a tool called hydrogeochemistry, which quite simply is groundwater chemistry. And what it allows us to do is basically collect groundwater samples. The groundwater flows along the bedrock that we can't see. It dissolves the bedrock, whatever the trace elements are that are in the bedrock end up in the groundwater. We can use relatively inexpensive drilling tools to systematically drill these basins, whereas conventional drilling would be cost prohibitive. We can collect groundwater samples. We can use the new lab tools, and we can begin to map the prospectivity and identify brand new prospects in this 55% of the state where we can't see the bedrock. It's such a powerful tool. It's being used all over the world. In Australia, they're funding a continental scale program looking at the entire country because 80% of Australia is undercover. BHP and Rio Tinto and all the world's biggest groups operating in Australia are already advancing projects that have been identified based on groundwater chemistry. There's groups in Namibia and Botswana looking for porphyry copper and Atacama. And so all we've done is take the same tools that are being used largely by the base metal and copper explorers and bringing it to the square on the planet that produces more gold by area than anywhere else, where half of that endowment is waiting to be found in these countries. Using this tool, we've now completed the world's largest program. We've drilled almost 6,000 boreholes we've sampled, predominantly from holes that we've drilled. That's about a $12 to $13 million generative exploration program that we've executed. And based on that program, we've now picked up land covering 4 district scale projects that we're now advancing. This one project at the south end of the valley called South Grass Valley is what's become our most advanced project. It's our flagship project. And as I mentioned, we've just begun our 3rd round of drilling at the project. So what I'm going to do quickly here now is switch over to our Verify model to begin to show you what this looks like now at a blind project. So South Grass Valley sits at the south end of the larger Grass Valley here, at the north end of which is Cortez. It's currently the world's lowest cash cost, all-in sustaining cost district. We're at the south end of the valley here. And we begin to advance these covered projects. We have to be able to systematically de-risk them ahead of beginning to integrate more expensive drilling programs. And what we do at all of our covered projects, it's the same systematic workflow. We begin by looking at the rocks that we can see. In this case, we were fortunate in that the lower plate carbonate units that we know host these big deposits are exposed along the margins of the basin, sticking out of the basin. And so where we have the high concentration of gold and groundwater that originally got our interest in the project, we begin to see there's big structural features, right sort of rocks, and indications of intrusive features, which are really the big check boxes, if you will. Could we find a big Carlin system sitting undercover here? Having get some confirmation that the architecture might be there, we begin to layer in some geophysics. Our interpretation of where this intrusive feature might lay improves. We have some indications of some major structural features, which we layer in more geophysics, in this case gravity, to begin to build even more confidence that there's a major structural corridor ripping through this otherwise covered environment where we're seeing indications of mineralization in the groundwater. We continue to add more geochemistry. In this case, we drilled 200 more boreholes for tighter groundwater sampling, geochem spacing. We began to integrate soil geochemistry because if there is a big Carlin system undercover here, you'd expect to see it in multiple sampling mediums. For scale, this north-south area here is 10 kilometers. So you get a sense of how big of a program we're executing here. The sort of scale of program that would ordinarily be done by a major, but that we're doing here within a junior. We look at the results of the geochemistry. We have very constrained geochemistry. This is gold and groundwater, supported again in soils. We're looking at mercury in soil. So we're seeing multiple geophysical tools telling us we got the right sort of architecture, multiple geochemistry tools telling us we have the evidence for mineralization over a district scale area. And it was those data sets that gave us the confidence to then go in and begin to put some fairly expensive drill holes into an otherwise completely blind target. In 2018 and 2019, we put 10 deep stratigraphic orientation holes across the project. It's important to point out that these were spaced out over almost 4 kilometers north-south. Every hole was 600 to 800 meters apart, and you could hide a 15 million ounce Cortez Hills deposit between every single drill hole. So at this stage of the program, it wasn't so much about skewering the bullseye, if you will. It was more about understanding all these good things that we projected based on physics, based on the geochemistry. Do they in fact exist undercover? And what we were able to confirm was yes, in fact, we have a characteristic Carlin type geologic architecture hosting a large district scale mineral system defined by classic Carlin alteration features, intense silicification, multi-phase oxide mineralization, gold, supporting trace elements over an area that we can measure in cubic kilometers. Quite simply, this is the largest new Carlin mineral system that's been discovered anywhere outside of a mine fence in the last couple decades. And based on that, we completed a second round of drilling last year to basically understand, can we peg the mineral controls? Because we'd found this very large mineral system, but ultimately we now have to figure out where within this mineral system do we have opportunities to find potentially economic grades. Based on that second round of drilling, we were able to identify a specific constrained geologic target where we have a specific geologic unit intersecting a specific structural corridor that today defines a geologically constrained target called East Golden Gorge. We've just begun a 10-hole program to test East Golden Gorge. And what's really important to point out here compared to any other drilling program in the state right now is really the size of the target. We've overlaid the target here with gold rush. This is 8 million ounces within a similarly stratigraphically constrained unit here that hosted the mineralization. So what we found here is a target the size of Gold Rush, which is the north end of the valley, by using the best new tools that were available in the industry, which is basically the golden groundwater. And you can see exactly how our original golden groundwater database got us back to this target that we're drilling today, that's allowed us to discover what we consider to be a district scale play, similar in size to the biggest trends in Nevada. This is our first target at the project. We have others that we expect to follow up with, but you already get a sense of what we found in this completely blind setting. So half of the state's gold budget's waiting to be found undercover. For each of the 3 districts sticking out of the ground, we expect to find 3 more waiting to be found undercover. And we believe we have the opportunity to find the first of these here at South Grass Valley. And we're currently drilling our first hole of the program right here. So all this data has been published. It's available on our website. Using this verify model, you're able to look at all the trace elements, all of the drilling results to date, and anyone that would like to learn more, we encourage you to take a look at the data. So I'm going to pause there and see what sort of questions we might be able to answer.
Perfect. Thank you, James. So now we'll turn to the Q&A sessions, and the last reminder to everybody that you can submit your questions at any point now for Nevada exploration. So the first question that we've had come in was just wondering if you could provide an update on the current SGV drill program. What is the projected timeline for assays? And is there a plan to put a second drill rig on site to speed up the program?
Absolutely. We're presently still drilling our first hole of the program here, which is hole 12, core hole 12. It's presently at about 4,500 feet. We haven't said much publicly about the hole. We provide monthly updates, and we'll be doing that again. But I can share that as we reached our projected horizon, things have hung together. The model is hanging together. It's been some challenging drilling, as we often find in these highly silicified, highly busted zones as we were projecting. So it's been slow drilling, but everything we've been seeing both visually and from our XRF workstation back at the office has told us that we've had lots of reasons to keep the hole going. And so despite the challenging drilling conditions, the hole is currently ongoing. It's approaching its target depth, and once we see a change, once we see that we're potentially out of the zone that got the action, we'll likely TD the hole. And at the moment, our plan is to then move to the south end of the project here. I mean, we evaluate these things daily, but at the moment, that's our plan. We have not yet submitted any assays. Once we finish the hole, once we get all the XRF and logging complete, we'll come up with a submission strategy. I would suspect we'll have all the first 2 or 3 holes in for assay and be able to speak about them. Certainly by the end of the summer will be the timeline for being able to have enough body of results to be able to say something potentially intelligent about it.
Right, great. Okay, another question that's come in, just wondering about if you're seeing a correlation to gold concentration and mercury concentrations, and is it optimum for both to be high?
Yeah, these sorts of correlations you have to be very careful on, because every stratigraphic unit may have different correlations, and different phases of the fluid flow have to see different correlations. So yes, when we get into the zones that we're paying attention to, we do see correlations between all the Cartland pathfinders, so which includes mercury. Okay,
great. And then I guess just a general question, what is, I guess, the typical path with your exploration model when you have the you know, how would you structure your program to kind of move from that
yeah, so
straight through the rest of the exploration process?
This table that's up here, can you still see my screen?
No, it needs to be relaunched.
Oh, how do I relaunch it? Can you see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay. We look at, because it's a good question, we can do the best generative program imaginable, and we can look at all of covered half of Nevada and come up with excellent targets, but we're still left with these 50 square kilometers of sagebrush, let's say. What do you do next? How do you systematically de-risk these projects? And I spent a little bit of time on the geophysics, spent a little bit of time on the geochemistry, but ultimately, what do you do once you start using drill holes, which are the most expensive tools in our toolbox? And this table here does a good job of really outlining what we can consider to be the 3 steps to the process. And the first step is really pegging the geology, because it's upon the geology that you can then hang everything else that you learn. And there was a great quote from a recent Barrick presentation that really they felt geology is what drives discoveries. And so our first round of drilling is pegging, do we have the right architectural features? Big, deep-seated structures cutting through reactive carbon host rocks that have been well prepared to host mineralization, potentially up against an intrusive, then we have to confirm, have these rocks been exposed to massive volumes of hydrothermal fluid flow that have together created alteration in geochem features that we can measure in tens of cubic kilometers? Because what we know from the 3 big Carlin camps is if you want to deposit 10, 20, 50 million ounces of gold, the size of the features that are created by that amount of fluid flow are huge. So first round of drilling is peg the geology, peg that you've got a mineral system that's big enough to be interesting. That's phase 1. Phase 2 of drilling is, okay, you found a really big mineral system, that's great. But ultimately, where are you going to go to find potential economic grades? And in order to answer that question, you have to establish what's controlled the flow of the mineralized hydrothermal fluids through the district. And those are called the controls for mineralization. So our second phase of drilling is about, within the system, how do we establish where the fluids came from, where they traveled, and where they were most likely to deposit their mineral budget. And so it's that second round of drilling that's about figuring out where the fluids traveled for. And then once you can incorporate your geology with your mineral controls, you can then go in for your third round of drilling, which is testing these mineral controls in the best places for potential economic grades. So we really look at it as a 1, 2, 3 sort of step process. So here at East Golden Gorge, we're clearly here at step 3. We understand the geology very clearly. I'd say better than any other covered project anywhere in the state. We figured out the mineral controls. And using that, we've now got a clear constrained target that here in phase 3, we're able to test for potential economic grades.
Perfect. We are coming up on the hour, but there maybe you can answer this last question pretty quickly. What's happening with Kelly Creek?
Kelly Creek, yeah, Kelly Creek's been optioned to a group called Austin Gold by some of the run by some of the ex-Pretium guys. They're going through a going public transaction right now. I think they're hoping for it to close in the next couple months. And once that's closed, they're going to have access to the funding to be able to begin their program at Kelly Creek. It sits in the larger Kelly Creek Basin, a large covered valley surrounded by about 70 million ounces. And one of our initial gold and groundwater targets sits in that basin. We control it, and Austin Gold has optioned that from us.
Great. So with that, we'll leave it there for Nevada Exploration. So I'd like to thank James for presenting the company to us.